Okay, hello, hello. How is everyone this evening? Alright, I just hit the live button, so we should be going live. Let's go ahead and verify that. Yes, it seems that my stream is on, and all the little push notifications are coming through my phone that we are probably good to go. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at YouTube here. I want to make sure I give you the link to my video right now. No, I would like to look at my web page here. Please bear with me a second. Nope, 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 no, 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 no. Okay. Let's get to my... No. This always seems like it's a little bit of a hassle, a little bit more each week. Okay, there we go. And it's got a nice, secure, Streamception. It's got a nice, secure video link for you to watch, so that it will definitely go through our announcements. So here you go. I know this is kind of weird watching me do this, but my broadcast link. They changed the system slightly. I can only give you a link to the broadcast after it begins. And I also have to provide a little bit more text here. So here's the link to tonight's broadcast. I guess you can skip ahead maybe a minute or two if you're watching this in the archive, because this does take a little bit, but I guess I'm just now finished. We'll get the pattern down. Okay, so people should be filtering in about now. These are my visual aids for tonight. Okay. Excellent. Looks like things are going good. Let me get to my broadcast page so that I can actually see what you are writing in the thing, and we'll be ready to get started proper. Alright, it is loading. We are here. Okay. So, tonight, let's go ahead and start off with what I'm sure what you're curious about is what are this week's assignments. So we have two things we're really tackling for this week. One of which is a reading assignment, which is, it might sound large, but it's not. You need to read, please read chapters 10 and 12 in your textbook. Okay. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that does cover a little bit of our content tonight, which would be visual aids, and also should cover some of the things that we talked about last week in persuasion. There is going to be different information in there that should be able to help you out. This week's writing assignment will be to, I'll create an assignment link for this, create a 3-slide PowerPoint or equivalent. I guess I wouldn't call it a presentation, but let's go ahead and call it a presentation. I think that's what the file names call themselves. Create a 3-slide PowerPoint or equivalent presentation on your persuasive speech topic. Following the principles we will talk about tonight. Okay, there will be an assignment link. Assignment link is in course content. Now, if you're watching this live, it has not been created yet, but I will create it. This is all due by next Wednesday. At we can put in next here. Next Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. All right. So there we go. Awesome. I just saw my view count really jump up there. So welcome everybody. Hope you're having a good evening. Okay, so these are our assignments for the week. It's nothing that too bad. Just read a couple chapters. They're very short, and again, one of those chapters is over stuff that we already talked about, and you already watched videos about. So you should be able to fly through that one. The other assignment, of course, is to create a 3-slide PowerPoint or equivalent. And by equivalent, I mean something like, Well, no, I mean equivalent. I think it's a Keynote, Prezi, um, really any kind of file that you could open on a modern computer. I would say PowerPoint, Keynote, or Prezi. I think Keynote will be able to be converted, um, so that should be just fine. But otherwise, you're creating something that has 3 slides in it, or three, I guess, in Prezi terms, you would call it 3 pans over, because in Prezi you have this panning camera. If you, um, but anyway, so you want to create a 3-slide PowerPoint or equivalent presentation, all right, on your topic, using these principles. Now, in terms of the actual speech, I've said again, and I'll say, or I've said several times, and I'll say it again as what I meant to say. We will not need to do a full-on visual aid for this presentation on camera because it is very difficult for you to have one laptop running your camera, maybe one laptop running the presentation, trying to get it all in the one shot, trying to have your notes on display. It's a lot, okay? So we're just really going to practice the principles we're going to talk about tonight, and then call it a visual aid growth experience for the week. All right. Are there any questions about this week's assignments? I see that the viewer count is going up, so welcome everybody. If you have any questions, please go ahead and ask me now about this week or next week, and if not, we'll go right on into our content. I'll also type in chat, hello. And I will let some dead air transpire for maybe about 45 seconds to a minute to see if there's anyone with a question. Well, it doesn't seem that way. All right, I'll be... Oh, hi, will this be the same visual aid we'll use in our speech? Hey there, Punky. You might have missed what I had said earlier. We will not need to use this in your actual speech. It's very difficult to get all the things in the camera. Plus, you may not have 2 or more laptops to display a PowerPoint. You may not have a power projector or a TV that you could put PowerPoint slides on, etc. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about good visual aid creation tonight. You're going to do a practice assignment for your written assignment this week, and then we're going to call it a day. So no, you do not need it in your speech. So I guess no, it will not be the same visual aid because you do not need one. No, that's okay. My computer itself is kind of funky this evening too. It's showing me a very fuzzed out preview of the YouTube output. So I hope that the video is sharp and legible for you at least. But in any case, so that's the assignment. That's a great question though. If you're able to, can you use one? I will not stop you. I believe you're Corey. I will not stop you. So no problems there. But do please make sure that you do follow the principles that we'll talk about tonight in good visual aid design, because if it detracts from your presentation, I might take some points off, but I don't really envision that being a problem either. Your computer is fuzzy too. Okay. Well, is it something with my broadcast settings? Doesn't seem like it is. The preview on my actual software seems to think that it's okay. Okay, your computer, Corey's computer is clear, and so is okay. All right, well, maybe we just need we just need to refresh the page, you and I. But I don't want to take up time doing that. Let's go ahead and start talking about some of these visual aids. Visual aids is kind of a difficult topic to talk about, and this is a dad joke here, but visual aids are difficult to talk about because as a medium, visual aids are supposed to communicate things visually. Visual aids, this is the note part here. Visual aids should be there to help explain things that are not explainable verbally. All right. So if you can't really describe it with words, then you need to use a visual aid. That's why when you have lots of financial presentations, they'll display charts and pie graphs and things like that to try to give a representation of the proportions of money being spent on this, that, and the other thing. Because it's very difficult, if not impossible, to try to communicate that in a totally verbal environment. All right. Sometimes what students will do, and again, hopefully that you all are in a different headspace with this because this is an online class, but sometimes people will get in this mindset that they have to have, well, okay, so for this assignment, it's still the same deal, I guess. You have to have 3 PowerPoint slides, right? So sometimes people will say, well, I just need PowerPoint slides. I don't really need them to have a particular goal. Or maybe they just need to, they're just so busy focused on getting the 3 PowerPoint slides that they forget that there needs to be a goal for each slide. So they might do things like if they're giving a speech about Punky Brewster, now there's an 80s show reference for you, they will just put a picture of the title card for Punky Brewster in the background while they're talking about it. That's not really a visual aid, and it's not very helpful. What you need to do is make sure that your visual aids have a purpose. Okay, make sure each slide has a distinct purpose. It is better to talk with a blank background than it is to put a random, I'm going to call it random, but they're really themed pictures. I suppose we could call them random or themed picture. And by themed, I mean just what I described. If you're giving a speech about Punky Brewster, sometimes they'll just show the title card throughout the speech. And that's the only visual aid that you'll get. That's not what we're aiming for. You're aiming for a specific targeted purpose, and we'll talk about that with some examples. Like I said, it's kind of difficult to explain visual aids, but it's easier to show you. But it's better to talk with a blank background than it is to just put up a random or themed picture. So don't really do that. All right. If you have a PowerPoint or if you have a slide that is relevant for one part of your speech but not for the next part of your speech, put a blank slide in. Put a blank slide in if you decide that the information on a previous slide is not needed as you move on in your speech. So sometimes, and again, we'll look at a couple of, they're not really presentations. We'll look at a couple of slide examples and talk about what we could do with them. But it's just easier, it's easier not to have slides sometimes, all right? So only in class like this would you ever have a requirement that says create 3 slides, all right? In a professional environment, your boss might say, I would like visual aids for this presentation on the finances you've got going on. But other than that, he or she is not going to be that specific, most likely. Maybe they'll be specific in giving you advice about what financial parts they want to be visualized, but otherwise they're not going to tell you it should be 3 or 4 or 5 or 20. They're going to tell you really just kind of what they want as opposed to how much. So keep in mind that as you go into the professional sphere and as we design these 3 slides tonight, or over the week rather, that you're not putting in random picture slides or themed picture slides. You're putting in slides that really do try to describe things that are difficult to explain verbally. Okay, so that's actually advice number 1, is basically don't do random slides. Keep it to the point where you just need to make every slide something that you want to explain, as opposed to just having one there. I mean, it could look slick and nice and be the best Punky Brewster title card that you've ever seen, and everyone can agree that it looks slick and nice. But if it doesn't have a purpose in explaining something, visually as opposed to verbally, then it doesn't serve a purpose, and it's kind of janky. Less is more. Okay, so the next part about slide design, and we'll kind of switch back and forth between examples and this Word document here. But the next part, let's go ahead and bullet pointify these. Yeah, excellent. All right, so our next piece of device here is that visual aids should have a clear and crisp design. The text pops up from the background, and the background is not distracting. So let's go ahead and look at a couple of examples and talk about how they might reflect this advice and these are all bad examples, and they kind of start out at pretty bad, and then we kind of go into better, and then finally one that's not quite really bad. It's kind of how we're going to scale this here. So this is our first example, so it's one of the really bad examples. Now, as you can see, it's not. I mean, if you were to look at it, it's not that bad. I mean, look, it's got the classic blue and gold, my high school alma mater colors, Go Carmel High School Greyhounds, blue and gold setup here. We got the gold text, we got the blue background. It's got to be great, right? Because blue and gold pop off each other. Well, kind of. Before we talk about the content of the slide here, I just want to point out that it's kind of nice up here. Actually, I would agree it looks kind of popping. Now, some people would say, some of my colleagues more specifically would say, never, ever, ever. Just like you would never use a yellow marker on a whiteboard, you should never, ever use a yellow font on a PowerPoint. I'm not quite that, I don't know, aesthetically picky. But there's some good pop down here. But this particular background, look what it does. It's like a nice background that has some cool colors in it, but the background changes shades, and I hope that you can see that. Yes, by the way, Ginny, statistics would be a great thing for a slide, and we're going to look at an example that that kind of looks like that, and it's not too bad. But statistics would be awesome for a slide. Or anything that could be turned into, like any kind of quantity that can be turned into a chart or diagram would be awesome content for a slide as well. Okay, but anyway, as we look at this like slick background here, it kind of, it changes shade. And as we go down the page here, especially down here towards the bottom, the text doesn't pop out as much. And it becomes difficult to read. And if it's blurry for you, it's actually pretty blurry for me down here, just because I think the color is blending together. And that's one thing we have to be cognizant of, is that sometimes when things are displayed on your computer monitor as you're creating them, are not going to project as well. Now, if we were in a classroom and I had access to an actual projector, this would be even more exaggerated, because down here on a projector, this shade of blue here, would actually be white, kind of like this border. So it really becomes difficult to read on a projector, particularly. So this is the kind of background that you should really avoid, because it's very difficult to recommend what text color would be good for this, because it changes shades, and it is kind of tacky or distracting to change the text color as you go along. Now, this slide has another problem with it, and that problem is that, well, the visual aid is describing something very verbally. In fact, it doesn't really need the speaker there to be there at all. It says Mount Abu is situated about 223 kilometers from Abbottabad and 82 kilometers north of Palanpur, and it just kind of goes on. It's pretty clear that whoever made this slide is intending to read from the slide during their presentation, or perhaps they're going to read from the presenter's view. Generally speaking, and this is going to be one of our other advice, generally speaking, slides need to ride the gray area between having clear information on it that the audience can understand intuitively, okay? But at the same time, the speaker needs to be there. Speaker needs to be there to explain the slide, okay? So this one violates this principle, right? It's basically a Word document on a PowerPoint. All right, there's really no reason to have a speaker here. You can just read it yourself, get all the information that the speaker's talking about. So what would improve this slide, perhaps? In this particular example, they would probably, in answer to maybe Ginny's question, we would be the discrete facts here would be like Mount Abu is situated about 223 kilometers from Ambabadad. Like that could have been a bullet point. All right, and they could have skipped all this part and then gone on to a different idea. Like another bullet point could be like the site of the world famous Delwara Temple. All right, and people would have been immediately understood what they're trying to describe on the slide, which is, you know, what the mountain is and where it's located and what it's famous for. But at the same time, the speaker would have been there giving all of this other information that really explained why it was important, and what other places existed, even though there were only a couple bullet points on the slide. It is difficult to kind of straddle that gray, and again, it's a gray area, but that's kind of the requirement, is that you be in this gray, kind of ambiguous area with your PowerPoint slides. They can't stand entirely on their own, i.e., someone can't just watch your PowerPoint slide in succession without you present and know every single word in your speech. But at the same time, they need you to explain the slide, but at the same time, it can't be so ambiguous that they have no idea what the slide is even about, right? So you've got to kind of put it in the middle of those two extremes, all right? So it has to have some ambiguity so that you as a speaker have a job in order to explain it, but at the same time, you can't be too ambiguous, otherwise, you know, it's just a Punky Brewster title card and doesn't really add anything to your presentation. Okay. Now, the next example here should give us a couple lessons, actually, and I'm kind of sad that we can't blow this up. Actually, maybe we can. Let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit, because this is a busy slide here. One of the principles or rules that I want us to understand here is that whoever wrote this slide or created this visual aid, I don't actually know if it's a PowerPoint slide. It looks like it's more of a flow chart that was created maybe in Paint. But nonetheless, it was used as a visual aid. And the problem with it, I mean, there's a lot of obvious problems with it, but one of the problems is that someone took a lot of time to create this, all right? But, I mean, just look at it. It's very difficult to follow. You've got what look like two arrows here, right? And it creates this, they bleed together to create this weird shape. I mean, I think those are two arrows. We've got lines here that don't have any arrows on them. So are these things connected or not? Because some things have arrows, some things don't. We've got a whole mess of a web over here as well. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure what exactly the subject of this visual aid is. Is it eTech 540? Is it the remediation of writing? And the reason why I'm asking that is because, usually when you have a thought web like this, whatever is in the center or has the biggest bubble is probably the subject of the slide. But, this one's in the center here, and this one's at the top, and this one looks like it even has more things radiating out from it than it does for this one. I'm not sure what it is. Except that it's some kind of a flow thought web type chart. So that's our next piece of advice, really. If I could stop my ranting about this slide for just a second, is that more work does not necessarily mean more clarity. In fact, get okay with the idea that you can vomit out all the words and ideas in your presentation onto the slide and then go back later and delete, somewhere like 80% of it. All right. Sometimes that's a good strategy to use. People don't know what they want in or out of their presentation, so they just kind of write everything down on a PowerPoint slide, or in this case on a flow chart. But in order to really make this truly effective as a visual aid, it needs to have simply less stuff in it. It's just very complicated and very difficult to follow. You don't even know. Like I said, I don't know where the beginning is. Is it here in the right? So more effort does not mean more clarity. Okay, it's clear that somebody thought a lot about the subject here. It's pretty clear that they put a lot of effort into breaking it all down and rendering it. But the problem is that this probably could have been, as is true for many of the other slides that we're going to look at today as well, you probably could have broken this down into 3 or 4 different visual aids just to try to get the content into different areas. The other thing with this slide is a problem with its visual aesthetic. And that problem is, again, this is I always forget the name of this painting. It's a very famous painting. I think it's like, the title of it is like Plato's Academy, only it's in like Italian. Whatever that translates to Italian. It's a famous Renaissance work. And it's very appropriate for something that apparently deals with education and religion. However, it would have been far more effective, especially because of all the content on the foreground here. This background would have been plain. Now, I don't think that would have fixed all of the problems with the slide because, again, it's just a little bit too busy in terms of what they're trying to do here. But this would have been improved a lot if they had a blank background. All right. So sometimes then again goes with the idea that simplicity is or less is more. All right. It was an appropriate background choice. It was a thematic background choice, but gosh, it just makes an already busy thing even more busy. So don't fall into temptation. I do not care if your background on your slides is blank, as long as the words and the chart or whatever you're trying to describe is clear and straddles that nice gray area between needing you to explain it, but at the same time being able to be clearly understood. So again, you can dispense with fancy backgrounds like this. So this fancy background is unnecessary. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and write that on our Word document. Get rid of fancy thematic backgrounds. All right, they can be distracting. And we can all agree that it's a great painting and that because it dealt with learning and in a religious aspect, and it looks like the content here talks about learning and religion, it's a great thematic choice, but it's just inappropriate for a truly clear visual aid. And I mean, there are other problems that can go on here again, but we got to move on to other examples, really. But the other thing I will point out is that it looks like there is some kind of color coding going on here. I'm seeing like this green color show up 3 times, showing this purple color showing up 3 times, and it seems, like they have meaning. Like philosophy is in green, and these are kind of philosophies, and this looks like a philosophy part of their course. This looks like a philosophy here. You've got people's names or philosophers' names. In this kind of soft purple here. So it's kind of clear that they had a thematic way of coloring this as well. However, as you would notice, there is no key to decrypt what the colors are. So one thing you should do, and I'm going to make this a separate piece of advice, if you use thematic coloring, which is okay, make sure you provide a key on the slide. Okay? So that people can understand what the color scheme is trying to do. Otherwise, why even have the color screen if people are guessing what the color scheme is about? All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to something that's maybe a little clearer. As you can see, this is a pretty slick slide here. The background isn't as obtrusive. In fact, it's very, very soft. Now, again, I can see that there are some colorful little swirls here in the background, and I think probably you can as well. On a projector, though, this would be totally white. Just based on my experience using this in my in-person class, it's totally white. So it's another example of how a nice visual design can sometimes be relegated to irrelevance because it doesn't show up during the presentation. But leaving that alone, now this one is a decent example because obviously it's the title or the subject is budget development process. This has a logo for whoever is the author of it. It looks like some kind of school district up there. And then this is the budget. So again, it's pretty clear to everyone that the budget is the subject, even if you didn't have this part up here. They even have a little formula up here. Beginning balance plus revenues minus expenditures equals ending balance. Now, I'm not exactly sure if that's relevant or necessary because it is such a very simple, balancing checkbook type deal that I don't know if it needs to be explained, but it is nice that they explain it, I suppose. We don't know who exactly this presentation was meant for. Maybe it's meant for, average people from the public that really just don't know how school districts or large organizations in general try to figure their budget. So, that could be a nice example, or it could be irrelevant based on the audience. But nonetheless, what I really wanted to talk about was that this chart, even though it's clear, it's got a good background, it's got clear titles, obvious what the subject is, unless they're trying to communicate something ironically in that the message here is, or the implied message is, that the budget is complicated and involves a lot of factors. Unless that's the message, it doesn't really explain how they do this process of finding the beginning balance, figuring out their revenues, and subtracting their expenditures. Collective bargaining agreements. Well, where does that fit into this equation up here? And this is one of the problems with a visual aid like this is that you have this formula up here, and it looks like the rest of the visual aid isn't really about that formula. I mean, it's about the general topic of budget, obviously, but it doesn't explain the formula that's being explained up here. It looks like it's just kind of random information, like here's all the things that go into the budget. Here's how we figure the budget. But these are really kind of two separate ideas, and they probably do develop on another slide. Furthermore, it calls it the budget development process, and again, unless the communication is trying to be ironic or is implied, it doesn't actually go through the process where we start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. It looks like the budget just gets all these factors thrown at it at once, and then they congeal into a giant blue ball of budget. Like I said, unless the communication is ironic about how busy and hard it is to do the budget, it doesn't really help explain the process either. It does a great job listing out all of the factors. Once again, there may be some color coding going on here. Maybe the red things are expenditures and the black things are the things they think they can count on, and the green things are whatever. Once again, there does need to be a key if this is a color code. Otherwise, I don't know, they maybe changed maybe they changed the colors for some other reason. And again, if the reason isn't clear, don't do it. Simple is better. Okay. So, yeah, I think that's all I really need to talk about for this slide. And really, the lesson I want you to take away from this, I was looking at my notes to make sure that I talked about it. If you title your slide something like budget process, let's go ahead and scroll up. make sure you detail that subject and not something else. Okay, so the big problem with this one isn't even so much the aesthetic, it's really a content problem. All right, they talk about it as a process. They even have the beginning of the talking about the process, but then the rest of the slide isn't about it at all. All right, I mean, I agree that these are factors that can influence a budget, but a process is about steps, going one, two, starting at the beginning, winding up at the end. It's not about necessarily factors. So the slide is not well, and like I said, unless the communication is ironic or satirical, and that the process is that all these things get thrown at you at the same time, and then from that mess arises the budget, then it really doesn't communicate its message very well. Okay, and our next example, our actual last example, we're getting closer now to a very appropriate visual aid. This is a visual aid I pulled from, as you can see, our old Speaker of the House, John Boehner. And we can have a political disagreement and talk about it after class about the content on the slide. I mean, I have no real opinion about entitled reforms and savings, but his team put together a nice slick slide that follows a lot of the advice that I was giving you. The background is plain, but the text pops out of it. Looks pretty good in that regard. Everything, like every new idea is its own bullet point rather than a paragraph that's meant to be read aloud. Again, I would say the criticism here is that some of these things could probably be shortened even more. Like these compound sentences could probably be shortened down into one, and then good old John Boehner could have explained what the rest of them were, or what the other phrase in the expression was. Yes. So this is fairly close to what I would expect you to do. If I were to grade this slide on its own, I would probably give it like a B plus or an A. But again, I would still say that it could use further refinement in getting some of that content down. Now, the only real thing that I also wanted to talk about here is that on the bottom of the slide, all the slides in this presentation had Speaker John Boehner written at the bottom. You do not need to do something like that in your slides by having your name on each slide. That's kind of, and actually that is a very common mistake. Is that people will put their name or their class or some kind of like academic header on each slide. And I know that in things like, and I think this comes from writing an English class where each page of your report has to have your last name and the page number on it. Some people continue to do that on a PowerPoint slide. Really, unless you're doing the very, 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 very first slide in a presentation, it's kind of tacky to put your name on it every single slide. That's really the main criticism here. That and the content could probably be broken down into a couple more bullet points or even another slide here. But otherwise, it's pretty succinct. I know it looks kind of boring, but it follows great design principles. Background pops, information is relevant. It does kind of stand for itself, but we would need John Boehner here to explain what exactly he's talking about. So it kind of straddles all of those things that we're looking for. All right. The only other criticism I would have for this, and then I'll stop my rant about it, is that some of these statistics here could probably be visualized as maybe a pie chart or a graph. All right. So here he talks about total reductions would be equally split between defense and non-defense programs. He probably could have made a slide in which those two things were equaled out, and therefore didn't need to write about it. Again, it's kind of subjective there, but otherwise this is a great slide in terms of its design. All right. Just try not to be tacky with the name on every slide, and do try to make sure that your bullet points are maybe one sentence or maybe a compound sentence at the most complex. All right. Here is actually a paragraph. It's two or three. This is actually 3 sentences long. It's not long sentences, but
You probably could have broken that down into a couple more bullet points. If you're finding that you want to write 2 or 3 sentences for something, that's your clue that you should probably make at least one of those ideas into its own bullet point. And that's kind of, let's go ahead and write that down. If you feel compelled to write 2 to 3 sentences on your slide, at least one of those ideas is probably most appropriately expressed as its own bullet point. All right, it's just kind of a rule of thumb. Like I said, there is an art to this. It's not a science, but once you're like, well, I wrote a three sentence bullet point here. Well, I feel like writing a 4-sentence bullet point here, and before you know it, your last slide is just a paragraph like this example. You want to avoid that, right? You want to break things up. You want things to be a little shorter, more direct, and you want to be needed. All right, so you're not trying to make the slide stand on its own. And that's really kind of what I keep coming back to, is that the slide should be clear, but they can't stand on their own. Okay, and now we have our next, or rather our last little thing here. And this is a picture that I keep to scale. Let's actually make sure I didn't zoom in by accident. Nope, it's at 100%. Good. So this is just a little guideline that I actually just found on Richie Song's blog about creating good visual aids, and in which he just kind of put out very visually what the font points look like on a projector. And we recommend that you start. He recommends you start at 24 points. I would recommend that you have a slide where the text is at 36 points. All right, and that's the ordinary text. So the title text is probably going to be 48 point. Your ordinary text is going to be 36 point. If you really need to save space, maybe 24. But these two things are too small, which is 12 point and 18 point. He also chose, for this example anyway, a Helvetica, but the point is to make a sans serif font because the letters are just a little bit more distinct on a projector. All right, on paper with lots of contrast, serif font like Times New Roman is okay, but really a sans serif font. I guess I should explain what I mean by sans serif. I don't know if they cover that in in writing classes anymore. But a serif is like, well, on Times New Roman. Let's go ahead and look at an example. Let's go ahead and change it to Times New Roman. Times New Roman. So the serif, and let's blow this way up. All right, the serifs are these little lines that come off here, off the T. As you can see here, let's try to find a T. If I make this a capital T, and let's blow that up to the same size. As you can see, there are no the little lines there. Those are called serifs. And on a projector, sans serif font is more distinctive than a serif font. All right. And I do believe Calibri is actually at value is 11. Yeah. Trying to get it set up. There we go. So that's just some advice there on how to have a decent aid. Ironically, you're right. I would criticize this. I just saw that. Again, the shades do change on this thing here, so maybe it's not exactly the best example, but at least the text still pops a little bit, and it does show the font. So, are there any questions about what would make a good visual aid for those of you watching live? Because really, that's kind of the end of my little spiel here about visual aids. So any questions about this or other things going on in the class right now? It doesn't seem like it. You know what? While I'm continue to wait, let's go ahead and make sure that you can see that there is a new assignment on here. We're going to create it right now. Um, the three slides on your persuasive speech topic. Please upload your PowerPoint, Keynote, or equivalent. If you do a Prezi, it'll be a web link. Presentation here. Keep in mind the following advice, and then I'm actually just going to copy and paste because I'm lazy the things that we wrote here. All right, and it's all due next Wednesday. Okay. And then the due date will be, oh gosh, it'll be what is it, Wednesday the 5th. Okay. At the end of the day. Boop. All right, and it'll be worth 10 points. So that's like an entire speech category. All right. And if we look here, 3 slides on your persuasive speech topic is posted up. Okay, and I don't see that there are any questions, so thanks again for your attention tonight. I do appreciate it. I hope this was useful for you in creating a good-looking visual aid. Again, you will not need to have a full-fledged visual aid for your speech, because it is going to be very difficult for at least many of us to have 2 laptop computers or a projector running in the background and also have the webcam up. I know a lot of us have just the webcams on our laptop from our speech and technology questionnaire that we did. So I know that's going to be difficult, so we won't have that be a formal requirement. If you do want to do it, please do go ahead. And also, please follow the advice that we went through tonight. But everybody needs to do this 3-slide assignment. This is going to be your practice over good visual aid techniques. I can't let you pass a Comm 210 public speaking course without talking about visual aids and how to do good ones. So this is our week on that subject. So when will your informative speeches be graded? That's a great question. It is taking me a little bit longer than I thought it would take me. I'm about halfway done. And while I'm talking about that, when you get your grade back, what it'll do is it'll appear in your grade center. I haven't made anyone's visible yet because I want to grade the entire, I was about to call it a sample. I want to grade the entire class so that I make sure that I'm grading it consistently. But when you get them back, what you'll see in the grade center is a number, your numerical rating out of 100. But next to that will be like I can't show you because it shows me when I click on the grade center, it shows me the instructor view and all your student information, and that would be very bad to put on YouTube. But it will show you the numerical rating, and next to it will be like a comic book style speech bubble, and it's going to be filled in blue. So if you click on that speech bubble, it will give you the written feedback that I have placed for your assignment. And I used the rubric that is in your textbook to do it. Generally speaking, I don't comment on things that I think you did 100% on. So like if your introduction was just fantastic, I might have written, introduction 10 out of 10, and then went on to the next rating on the little comment sheet that on the little comments that I provided for you. I do write about I would say at least a paragraph for each speech. Ironically enough, the best speeches I have probably the least feedback for, because I'm just like, wow, you did a great job. I really enjoyed this part of your presentation. Full credit. But everybody will have comments that you can look at and things that you can improve for next time. It is taking me a little while, but that's how you would get access to that. You would click on your grade center. It will show you the score, and next to the score in that speech bubble are going to be the comments. All right, and that should be coming out. I should learn my lesson and not give specific due dates, but it should be completed this week. I'm about halfway through. It's Wednesday. I should have it done um, in the next few days. But again, I do want to make sure I grade everyone consistently, so I don't publish grades until I'm done with the whole group. Because then it might be funny that maybe one day you log in and you've got a perfect score, and then maybe I mark someone down for something that I noticed in yours, and that's kind of a D word move to retroactively take points away. I kind of do that on the sly when it's secret. I'm just kidding. I don't really grade that way, but I do want to make sure that I grade everyone's fairly, so I don't reveal the scores until I'm done with the whole group. But that's kind of the hold up there. But it is getting done, so you should expect those soon. I do want to get these done before you start making your outlines for these speeches in case you need to make changes in your speech preparation. But for now, let's just focus on the visual aid. You focus on the reading and the visual aids. I'll focus on getting your speeches back to you and commented. And that'll be how we divide the work. But that's a great question, Jenny, and I appreciate you asking it. I guess I am dragging my feet, but it's not out of willful keeping you in the darkness. I just want to make sure I get everyone's graded before I publish results to anyone. Okay. Well, it seems like that was all that we needed. I want to thank you all again for stopping by. We had a good number of people in here, some good participation. I know I talked a lot, but I do thank you for watching. Have a great week. Have a great evening. What I should do is I should also post this. I can do this off camera, but I should post this as an announcement. Thanks again. Have a great night. I'm going to go ahead and sign off.